So I just got home from a very long day, and I'm very tired. But I was making myself a cup of coffee, and which I have right here. And I came across, I was like checking YouTube, just seeing if there's any updates on things going on, and just want to say here for the record, I'm trying not to talk too much about what's going on in Iran and stuff like that because frankly, I'm a little tired. I'm a little tired of trying to get people to see a different angle of this. And, you know, I think in the end, we're going to have to wait and see what happens. We really don't know for sure. By the way, I also want to make another video about theories and conspiracy theories. And the problem with today's conspiracy theorists on the Jews, there's a serious problem with this kind of thinking, but I'm going to save that for another video. But I came across this video from Steven Crowder's channel, Gerald, this time. Now, I've had my disagreements with Gerald in the past. I've actually had a small debate with Gerald on Twitter over dispensationalism a while back. So we've had that conversation before. It was kind of interesting. I didn't think I was going to get any feedback from him. He actually replied to my comment on the show, and we had a small back and forth on Twitter afterwards. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. So anyways, but what he talks about here with what I would say Tucker Carlson's very naive take about China, incredibly naive. It really just made me go, I gotta try and respond to this. I might comment on what Gerald and I forgot the other guy's name, Lane, what Lane says here. Lane's very informed on a lot of these things. He actually lived in China for a while, even though he's not Chinese, but as you're gonna see. But they have a really good take here, and I just want to respond to Tucker's comments here real quickly as they go here. There are some things that I noticed in Tucker's commentary here that shows double standards, just inconsistency, and once again, incredible naivety. All right, here we go.
Media that are buying this, picking up on it, and parroting these talking points in general. So with that, let's take a look at Tucker Carlson and him discussing Taiwan with the editor-in-chief of The Economist.
The U.S. is not going to defend and cannot defend Taiwan. Now,
and should not defend?
I don't know, should? I don't, that's something.
I mean, I'm asking you to lay out what you think are coherent.
I think we've reached the limits of our power, and power has limits. Like, that's another thing just to keep in mind. Power's not infinite. You can squander it. And we're in the process of doing that.
And what about Japan and South Korea?
Oh, man, it's hard. I don't understand exactly how that's going to go at all from an American perspective. But, like, in the end, big powers want to and get to control their regions.
Okay, so this is kind of important right here what Tucker says. Big powers want to and can control their regions. So they want to and they can. So he's admitting that big powers have a desire to basically go beyond what they currently have and get more. So they want to expand and then control their own regions. Now, he didn't say country. He said the region. So that means, in Tucker's philosophy, a big power can, and it doesn't seem like he's against the idea, maybe he's just being neutral here with this statement, and he's just describing what he believes is what big powers do, but they can control their region. Now, I would agree with that sentiment. I would definitely agree with it. The problem is Tucker then says the United States basically shouldn't be able to do that very thing. The very thing that he says, this is what big powers do. We're a big power. The United States is a big power. So apparently the United States is the exclusion here. We're not allowed to expand and control our regions. So to me, this is just an incredible level of hypocrisy from Tucker. It shows as far as I can tell, a significant lack of self-awareness of his own thinking. I know he says he's for America, and I'm not going to be like a lot of these critics of Tucker who says he's the devil and he's, this, that, and the other thing, and he's bought and paid for. I don't know if that's true. I think Tucker genuinely believes the things that he's saying. I really, really do. I think that's what makes it even more dangerous, because it's one thing to be bought and paid for to say certain things, to say things in a certain way. It's a completely different situation when you, and I would say more dangerous situation, when you genuinely believe your own convictions and your own ideas, your own propaganda, as it were. And because now you're going to be acting on it in ways that could be dangerous. So, yeah, we'll keep going.
We have something called the Monroe Doctrine. This was another problem I had with Russia. It's like Russia, of course, is going to demand influence in Ukraine. And you could say, oh, it's a sovereign country. They can't have any influence there. Be real. A big power wants to control, hopefully in a non-brutal, enlightened way, but they want some influence over their neighbors.
I agree, Tucker. Absolutely. Be real. Just be real about it. Tucker, that's the problem here. Like, that's the problem with Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson is not being real about the situation with Iran and how it expands to bigger issues. He's just going, yeah, it's got to be for Israel. And all of the Israel conspiracy theorists are all, it's just, this is all for Israel. Even though Trump has numerous times in Israel's own airstrikes, Trump has called them out and told them to stop numerous times. That's not somebody who's under the boot of Israel. That's not what that is. And again, I'm going to go over this with more when I talk about conspiracy theories. And the problem with a lot of the conspiracy theorists today, confusing things like correlation and causation, things like that. But, he's basically saying here, what Tucker is basically saying here is Russia gets to bully Ukraine because Russia's a bigger power. That's what he's saying. That's what he's saying. But apparently the United States doesn't get to do the same thing, doesn't get to bully China because it's the bigger power. How is that not self-contradictory? How is that not hypocrisy on Tucker's part? That doesn't make any sense to me. He acknowledges and says Russia gets the right to do this, but the United States doesn't get the right to do it. And you might be saying to me, by the way, Chase, are you actually admitting the United States gets to bully other countries and gets to, look, yeah, I kind of do. I believe, as flawed as it is, I told somebody on Facebook today, for instance, we've been hashing out back and forth disagreements on this whole Iranian thing. And, he's all fixed on satanic Zionism, stuff like that. And I'm just telling him, you can believe that all you want, dude, but this goes beyond all that stuff. This is different. But I told him this. I said, right now it's the United States or China. It's one of these two. You got to pick one. You don't get to pick, some third romanticized idea version that you want. I want this idea as well. I would like for this to be the case, but that's not what we're dealing with. Like Tucker said, you got to be real. I agree with him. Problem is he's not actually being real about it, and he's also being a hypocrite. I describe it like this. It's either Rome or the Visigoths. Which one? You got to pick one. I'm going with Rome. Rome's ruthless, pagan in many, many ways, that kind of stuff. But you know what? It's better than barbarism, and in this case, the Chicoms. It's better than communist China. Which one do you want? Which one are you going to take? That's what you have to. You have to wrestle with that, guys. You're going to have to wrestle with that. Yeah, and I don't know how else to get that into your head. For me, as I've said over and over again, this is a pragmatic issue for me. The spiritual aspect, the theological aspects, they're absolutely there. But let's just be honest. So much of that is theoretical. So much of that is abstract. It's not dealing with the here and now, the practical existential reality that we have to deal with right now. And for me, a United States that is dominant in the world makes pushing the kingdom of God into the rest of the world much easier for all of us, to a point where we can change things in a better way. Anyways,
We can no longer be the sole author of terms, of commerce, of anything. We have to share power.
sharing power. Look, I would agree with Tucker. I want to live in a world where we can share power and we can have mutual agreements and we can, make deals with one another. I think that's an ideal world. I would like to live in that world. I'm in a total agreement with him. With my friend I'm just mentioning here, I'm agree with him. I agree. I would like to see a world where we would have the ideal scenario of where we share power, we do business, we make deals with one another, we don't blow each other up, we don't stab each other in the back or anything like that. We, all this stuff, mutual trust all the way around. Absolutely. But the problem is when China is acting the way it is, and look, the United States, yes, the United States, I'm not denying that the United States does not act in bad ways. But you don't have, right now, you do not have that great Christian army that can enforce Christian law into the world to make all these countries play nice together under a powerful Christological kingdom of sorts government. You don't have that right now. You have China or America. That's just what you got. It's all you've got right now. So the way I see it is, with that reality that you have to deal with, you have to live in that reality and you have to act according to that reality. Not in a way that you deliberately sin, but in a way that you go, let me sum this up. Let's play ball with China. I'm all for playing ball with China, and I think Trump would absolutely want to make good deals with China. I genuinely believe deep down Trump would be like, I think he wants to, he tells Xi Jinping, like, I want to actually make good deals with you, but you guys got to behave. You guys got to play ball. And Xi Jinping and the Chi-Coms ain't playing ball. They won't play ball. Somebody who won't play ball, who won't sit and meet, on equal terms at all. Someone who won't do that, you can't trust that person. You're going to have to do something about that person. That person usually has nefarious purposes. So to share power with China means they got to play ball. To make sure that they play ball, you got to have the bigger stick. And that's what we have right now. And that's what Trump's trying to make sure that we have, to make sure they play ball. Now, Crowder and Lane are going to go through here some really important factors that, once again, the conspiracy theorists, guys, about it's all the Jews, it's not in their thinking process at all. It's not in the equation whatsoever. They're just thinking Epstein, and I get it. I totally understand. The Epstein stuff is still really important, but this is also really important. You're never going to get the Epstein files if we lose this. You're definitely never going to get it then. You will not get justice if the United States on the global stage crumbles. So you want justice? You're going to have to play the long game, guys. So
With China.
Of course, because of their scale. And so there's got to be a non-destructive way to do this.
I would agree. A non-destructive way to do this. There has to be. And that's what Trump is doing right now. Believe it or not, Trump is actually setting America up right now to have the bigger stick, which means China cannot afford to be destructive. We talk about history repeating itself, and everybody's saying history is repeating itself in the sense that, it's the Iraq War all over again. That's not how history is repeating itself. You want to know how history is repeating itself right now? 1936, 1938, 1939, 1940. You know what each of those years have in common? Those were years in which Hitler made aggressive pushes into the Rhineland, taking Czechoslovakia, and then the demands on Poland, which led to World War II. In each of those situations, the reality of the situation was the Allies, the good guys, as we're told, and I do believe that, but I just think the good guys screwed up horribly in so many ways. But the Allies, they tried to find a way in which they avoided war because they were traumatized by the First World War. And that rightfully so, should be traumatized, should be absolutely horrified of another world war. They've just started rebuilding after World War One. And so many people dead, soldiers, civilians alike, economies destroyed and just thrown into the abyss. Governments and systems collapsed completely. All this kind of stuff. So they're absolutely traumatized. And that trauma, guys, is what led them to make the decisions they made that didn't confront Hitler when they had the chance to, and they could have stopped him and dead in his tracks. They absolutely could have. But they were traumatized. They were like, no more wars. No more wars. No more wars. We avoid it at all costs and all this stuff like that. That's the real history that's repeating. We are living in a time where people are traumatized from war. Joe Kent, I think, definitely, truly is traumatized from war. Dude was a Green Beret, of course. Of all people, someone like him should be traumatized from it. Should be not want to see any more American soldiers die in useless foreign wars. It's trauma. But the trauma is blinding you to seeing the truth that we're dealing with right now, to the point that you're just like avoiding wars at all cost. Well, World War II, guys, could have been avoided if, when Hitler went to reoccupy the Rhineland, the French forces just swallowed their fear and went right into that Rhineland to confront him, and the German soldiers would have retreated en masse without hesitation. They were under strict orders to retreat if they were confronted. And if they retreated, that would have looked horrible on Hitler. Dude could have been kicked out of power. There would have been no World War II, most likely, in that scenario. The same thing with Czechoslovakia. The same thing when, but by the time we get to 1939, it's too late. A war guarantee for Poland guarantees its own self-suicide and Soviet and Nazi occupation of Poland. And even after war is declared, France, I'm not going to get into all that stuff, but the point is that because they were trying so hard to avoid war at all costs, they got something even worse. The consequences were far worse. Imagine our consequences for not swallowing our fear for just a little bit longer and dealing with this issue, confronting, I'm not going to say today's Hitler, but in the analogy, you might say today's bad guy, China, communist China. I'm going to say communist China because I don't got anything against Chinese people, but communist China, absolutely. If we don't do it right now, what's going to happen in a couple of years? Those are the history lessons we have to learn, I think. So that's what Trump is doing right now. Trump is making sure there is no re-entering the Rhineland. He's just trying to strip them of the ability to do it right from the get-go, to stop them in their tracks. The Chinese economy, from what I've seen, is in decline. It is in bad shape. They are forced right now to import energy resources, which includes Iran, which is one of the reasons why we're in Iran. That's not good for China. That's bad news for them. Trump is trying to choke it for good this time, to make sure it's the current Chinese government. I think the idea would be to see it collapse and a new Chinese government that would actually cooperate and give us the world that Tucker Carlson wants. But with this kind of China, that's not going to happen. It's just the way it is. All right, so listen to these guys respond to Tucker here. I think it's really good.
There was a lot there. What part of the Chinese propaganda that Tucker Carlson seems to be parroting there stood out to you the most?
So give me a second on this, but the one that jumps out is his either fundamental misunderstanding or misinterpretation of the Monroe Doctrine, which was to not allow, but so that the United States would control the Western Hemisphere and prevent other powers from interfering in that. While we said we would not interfere with Europe's pre-existing colonial interests outside of the Western Hemisphere. So first of all, he has a misunderstanding there. Second of all, the U.S. foreign policy now and has always been is to be the hegemon in our region, which is the Western Hemisphere, while not allowing any other country, singular country, to dominate its region. So therefore, we don't let Russia dominate Europe, Eurasia. We do not let China dominate the Western Pacific.
Yes, exactly. And there's reasons why you can't. If you want to know basically why I believe this, I would invite you to watch the video I just made about World War One, the story of World War One, how it broke out, and why each country made its decisions. Because these countries cannot afford to allow rival countries to gain any upper hand over them, because that would leave them powerless to those rival countries. And I say, why can't they just get along? I'm sure it would be ideal for them to get along, but that's extremely hard to do, guys. That's just not, you can't solve that by just saying, let's be friends. That's not, you can't do that, because sometimes you extend your hand so much, you might just get it cut off. So you have to play your cards carefully. You have to be ready for the worst. And oftentimes that leads to paranoia between countries. Germany and France in World War One, paranoia. And much of it's warranted. It absolutely is warranted. But it also leads to catastrophe. But when Russia mobilized in World War One, Russia was the first country to mobilize. When they mobilized, Germany saw that and saw no choice, but it had to mobilize too. Why? Because you cannot allow a neighbor who is not a friend to have a fully mobilized gargantuan army on your doorstep, because they can just walk right in and take you out with no contest whatsoever. You can't take that chance. Well, they haven't done it yet, but they can. The point is that they can, and you can't just mobilize in like a couple hours. That takes days to do. So when they mobilize, Germany has no choice but to mobilize. I'm telling you guys this because you, like I said, Tucker and you guys think the way you guys think, you cannot just do these things that you guys want to be done. Tucker, let's just be real. Exactly, Tucker. Let's be real. We have to be real about this. You want to be real? We got to be real. We cannot, the United States is in a position to be able to say, it's really like Britain's balance of power theory, which again, I was opposed to it for a while, but now I kind of see the point. Guys, Napoleon almost took over all of Europe. He almost took over all of Europe. He almost ruled singularly by himself all of Europe. Now Britain starts to really impose this doctrine called the balance of power theory. The idea that no single power can be allowed to have too much power in Europe. So what they will do is when one power is showing heavy aggression and is growing in size and capability, Britain's doctrine is we will side with the lesser powers. We'll side with them to make sure that bigger power doesn't get singular hegemony. I always say hegemony. I don't know why. Hegemony. To prevent them from being able to do that. Because, guys, if you allow them to do that, if you allow Napoleon to nearly take over all of Europe, you're stuck. You can't. It gets to a point where you can't even stop them. They will become so powerful. There's nothing you can do to stop them. Now, Napoleon, I think Napoleon's drug was the conquest, and he kind of destroyed himself in the end. He ground down his own armies. He was a good general, not a good emperor. But nevertheless, guys, what if Napoleon was fully successful? What would Europe do? Napoleon had all of Europe at his will. He was forcing European armies to fight for his coalition causes to defeat more European armies. He was destroying their own sovereignty. In fact, that's actually where nationalism comes from. It comes from after the Napoleonic Wars. The idea that why should we fight for France's? We are Germans, basically, and we should fight for Germany's interests, not France's, and things like that. That's kind of where nationalism came from. Fun fact. Anyways, but so what you have to do, guys, is you cannot allow another Napoleon to rise. If China and Russia gain too much influence, especially in particular over the oil fields in the Middle East, there's no stopping them. They'll be able to do whatever they want. They will not only be able to kick us out of the Pacific, they will be able to go even farther than that. Why should they stop there? Why should they stop there? Tucker said it himself. Big powers, they want to expand and they want to control their regions. Why would they stop at their own regions if they have all of this stuff? They got this, they got that. Nothing stopped them from taking that. And it's, in Europa Universalis 5, it's called blobbing, where this country would get so powerful, it's just slowly, one by one, eating up all these smaller states who can do nothing to them because they're too tiny. They have no way to win. That's what we're going to end up being like, guys, if we allow China and Russia to continue to expand. And look, see, I've said this over and over again. I have been where Tucker is at. I know what that's like. It's just simply ignorance. It just is. You have to face the reality. Again, I invite you to go watch my video on World War One, the way the men were thinking in World War One, because I hope that it puts in perspective for you why these countries make aggressive actions like these rather than just, hey, why can't we just talk? It's just not that simple. It just isn't. I wish it was, but it isn't. It's the reality of the situation we're facing. So,
because once you let those countries dominate a region, right now there's no hegemon in Asia.
Right.
There's no global hegemon, so we don't control Asia, we don't control Europe, but we have interest in those, and it's obvious that we have commercial interests, security interests, because we are a Pacific country. So what he's saying is we essentially allow China to control Asia. What that means for Japan and South Korea, I think it's very obvious. I don't think they'll be treated as peers or as equals.
Man, I don't know was his response. That's tough.
We've seen this historically, just like we didn't want.
Yeah, he's like, I don't know what that means. Yeah, because Tucker's position, his perspective, doesn't have any room to compute that, because it's incredibly naive. It's just a very naive view. And so when you come across information that you've got to deal with, if you're going to be honest, you just basically go, I don't know, man. I really don't know. Again, I know exactly what this thinking is like, because I was just in the same exact position not very long ago. But it's very naive. It simply does not account for reality. It reminds me of Infinity War, when they're trying to come up with a plan to capture Thanos, and then what's his face, Starkiller, no, Starkiller, Star-Lord, Quill. It's been a while since I've watched the movies, but Quill's like, they're coming up with this plan, and Quill goes, after they give this big old elaborate plan, right? Like, this is what we'll do. And Quill just goes, that's a nice plan. The problem is it sucks. Like, that's kind of the way I look at a lot of you guys. It's like, that's a really interesting theory, Tucker. The problem is it's stupid. So anyways, but so it is, though. It really is. And it's just, I don't know what else to describe, but just naive and just doesn't account for the reality of the situation. So what Tucker just basically does is just goes, I don't know, I don't know, you know. Tucker, that's kind of important, dude. That's kind of important, and he knows that's a problem because he knows that China, if China actually becomes the hegemonic, dominant power in Asia, which is crucial to commercial trade for the United States, if they become that dominant power, Japan ain't going to be able to stand up to that. Taiwan won't be able to stand up to that. The Philippines won't be able to stand up to that. And then pretty soon you're going to start moving farther south until eventually China will be able to basically control the Pacific Ocean. You want to allow that to happen? You want that? You guys want that to happen? If you don't want that to happen, guys, it's just, again, just go, this is all just American propaganda. Okay, well, you want to take that chance, okay? Maybe it is propaganda, but maybe it's also true. How do you prove it's propaganda? How do you prove that? I mean, I don't think you can really. A lot of it can be propaganda, but propaganda, see, the thing about propaganda is it operates on bits of truth. And I don't, again, you guys, you can't take chances when you're running countries, when you're running global empires. Yes, the American empire is sort of an unofficial empire, but it is, and I'm totally cool with it. But like I said, I choose Rome over the Visigoths. But you when you have something like that, you can't take chances. You just can't. You've got to make sure and that sometimes means preemptive strikes to ensure potential enemies never get any foothold because it will cost you your empire. All right.
Want to allow the Japanese to control Asia for the exact same reasons.
And still don't.
And we still don't. If Japan wanted to remilitarize and take over that, we couldn't because 50% of the globe's economy is in that region. That means some of our biggest trading partners, where our crops go, where we get stuff from.
Yep.
It's vitally important. So if we follow the line of thinking that Tucker wants us to follow, and that starts with the first domino and not intervening in a Taiwan contingency, because make no mistake, that is the first domino to that first island chain falling and then being able to project power into the Pacific.
It is true. China has specifically stated it has intentions to take Taiwan. That is simply fact. That is just fact. Now, why is Taiwan important? Well, because Taiwan is crucial to our, microchips, things like that. All the cell phone that you're watching this video on, or the computer you're watching this video on, the iPad, whatever. The computer that I have here, the computers in all the new cars, in all of our military hardware, all of these computers that run our AI systems, these are all based on electronic chips and technology that comes from Taiwan. You want to let China take that? See, guys, my hope is that maybe now, like, you start thinking about this stuff and you go, gosh, well, I guess, no, actually, that's not good for us. That actually is bad. And maybe you start to see the big picture and get past this stupid, it's the Jews stuff. I was on that bandwagon. I get it, but it's stupid. Okay.
It can keep us out. We lose huge commercial interests, and we lose not only that, but prosperity in our own country. Read the book, read Elbridge Colby's work on this. He explains very meticulously how our interests being taken over by China in that region would materially ruin the quality of life in the United States, because once they achieve their power there, what they are going to want to do is make sure that we do not have the capability to challenge that. So they will systematically weaken. And if you think they'll just let us exist peacefully over in the Western Hemisphere, no. We are not stupid. They're not stupid. Russia's not stupid. We're all playing the same game.
Exactly. I mean, exactly. He just nails it. He is completely right. 100%. I wish I could say it more than I already have. Tucker Carlson is just flatly naive. just thinks, why can't we, if we just go home and, show these people that, see, we're reasonable people and we're going to leave you guys alone. Let's play ball. It just assumes that that's going to go over well. No, that's not going to go over well. And again, when you're running an empire, see, as I've said before, the reason why Tucker thinks this way, the reason why a lot of you guys in the Jews conspiracy theorist group think this way is because you're thinking like little tiny average Americans. When you have a problem with somebody who's threatening you in your home, that's a problem that's, you're not allowed to go over to their house and take them out. That's a problem that can get fixed often with a nice just phone call to the police, and that's all that's all she wrote basically. Maybe you do have a confrontation. You're not allowed to preemptively strike. You have to wait for them to strike, and when they do preemptively strike, or they do strike, you need to defend yourself. Lord willing that you're successful in your self-defense, you might get a gunshot in a window somewhere in a door that gets fixed pretty easily, and there you go. But that's not the same as if you run that same mindset while running an empire, because you don't just lose a window, you don't just lose a door, you lose far more. The stakes are much higher. And before you say, well, Chase is saying that empire is more important than the average American lives, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just stating to you that you guys are thinking like the things that you have to lose here, like maybe a job that can usually just get fixed with applying for another job, is not the same as losing entire control over entire regions for an empire that could bring that empire down to its knees. Those are two different things. And what Lane is saying here is that the naive thinking that you can just say, hey, let's just be friends, is gonna get people killed. And once again, I wish that it wasn't this way. I really, really do. I don't know how much more I can say that. I really wish it could be that way. But it just isn't. Not right now, anyway. We can get there. I think we can get there. But it's going to take time. And misguided idealism, like Tucker's, is going to make it much harder to get there. That's why Tucker is wrong. And that's the problem with Tucker Carlson. That's the problem with a lot of you guys. Now, I say you guys because most of you who comment on my videos are people who disagree with me. It is what it is. I'm okay with being the unpopular guy. But that's the way it is. Let's see what we got more. What else we got here?
Tucker just wants us to lose that game for some reason.
It seems like that, but it also seems like a big advertisement for government-controlled economies. And what we've seen with China is not a complete like Russian system where they're setting the price of everything, right? So it's not completely top-down. It's basically a system, and you probably have better kind of language for this than I will, but in a sense, there's an element of capitalism with heavy government control.
State capitalism.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. State capitalism is probably the best way to say it. And that's kind of the in vogue thing right now. Mm-hmm. Let the state have enough power to determine what kind of rights you can have through a social credit score, what kind of traveling, banking information you can, or banks that you can even be a part of, places that you can possibly go. Your life will be controlled, but in exchange for that, you'll have a relatively high quality of life. Now, hopefully is the right answer. You may want to kill yourself and or others because of how kind of suffocating that life.
I think they're talking about the Chinese system, yeah, with that. So again, that's why I say you have either Rome or the Visigoths. Which one do you want to rule over everything and to control everything? With Rome, you're under the Roman system. And again, they're ruthless. They're going to demand stuff from you. Absolutely. But at least in Rome, they kind of let you keep your little place. They sort of mostly just let you do your own thing, just as long as you don't upset the status quo. Um, there's in other words, there's stability and there's civilization in Rome. With the Visigoths, you really don't know what you're going to get. And in this case with China, it's not good. Okay, it's just not good. That's basically what you're going to get. So you got to pick one. Which one is it? Rome or the Visigoths? So that's my problem, guys. That's my problem with you guys. My problem is not that you guys don't want to see real change that leads to God's kingdom flourishing in the world. That's not my problem. I want the same exact thing. My problem is you guys don't have ways to do that. You offer no solutions other than things like, America is just so full of sin. We have the blood of millions on our hands and we need to repent. Again, I'm like, I agree with you, dude. What's your plan to get America into that kind of a place where it's going to start repenting of its sins? What's your plan? Give me something. Give me a plan. Just giving me rhetoric? That ain't a plan. That's just you, again, pissing and moaning about stuff and doing nothing about it. Offering no real plan. That's my problem, guys. You're not facing the reality of our current situation. Instead, what you're doing is you're going off on conspiracy theories that you can't actually prove. And again, that becomes very dangerous, guys, when you run off of conspiracy theories that can't actually be proven true. And don't tell me you can prove it, because the only thing you guys can offer me is correlation that can support the conspiracy theory, but you don't have direct causation. You don't have the direct smoking gun that actually links these things together. That's not proof. And you might say, well, Chase, your theory doesn't have proof either. Sure, yeah, it doesn't. I also have correlation. But then at that point, it becomes which theory best explains the data. I'm going to get more into that in another video about that. I'm going too far off on that, but I'm going to end this here just saying this is the problem with Tucker Carlson and his ilk. This is my primary issue with him. Is his foreign his philosophy on foreign policy is very naive, it's very ignorant, and is frankly dangerous. It's going to destroy America. And I think if you're America first, that what Tucker was talking about, that is not America first. That's misguided America first. And that's why it's dangerous, because you're acting completely on the delusional idea that what you're doing is in the best interest of America, and in reality it's going to get people hurt. It's prime example when Mao first took control of China. He instituted communist policies that ended up getting millions of people killed. But instead of recognizing that his philosophy was the problem, it was just, nope, it's got to be something else. So he just doubles down and more people get killed. That's what happens when you don't, when first you have a philosophy that's very flawed and it gets people killed. Secondly, when you refuse to acknowledge that and you continue with the flawed philosophy, that is fatal. That's why this is crucial. That's why I'm trying to get to you guys. This stuff is, again, like Quill said, it's a very nice idea. The problem is it's stupid. It's not going to work. There's no realistic plan to make this stuff actually work in the real world. It's just a bunch of kumbaya. Let's just play nice and see what happens. Yeah, hey, it could work out well, but it also might not. And if it doesn't work out well, you're freaking screwed, because you just gave a bad person tons of power and you have no way of getting it back from him. And that evil is going to get to just run amok and do whatever it wants. The Visigoths can just run around and do whatever they want. You can't just open the gates of Rome to the Visigoths and just expect, hey, if I show them this, it shows them that I'm a partner, I'm a friend, let's get along, and that could happen, but it also might not. Is that a risk worth taking? I say it isn't, because you could lose everything. Yeah, look at these guys, these kind of shady guys. I'm going to welcome them into my home to show them that I am a good person, and that will show, hey, I'm not a threat to you guys. Let's just be nice. And they might be cool guys. They might not, and you might lose everything. With your wife and your children in the home, your wife, your daughters. That's not a risk you can take. You can't take that risk. You must always be carrying the bigger stick, because that's the reality of the world we're dealing with. It's just that way. So that's my gripe for the day. I will talk to you all later.